Hello friends, welcome to Buried Truths, where the dust of time is swept away and history's deepest secrets rise to the surface. Let's view the video. Top 8 Longest Wars in History. 1. The 100 Years' War. The 100 Years' War was a prolonged conflict between England and France that spanned from 1337 to 1453. It stemmed from dynastic disputes over the French crown and territorial claims. This war was not one continuous battle, but a series of campaigns, truces, and resumptions of hostilities. King Edward III of England laid claim to the French throne, which triggered the initial conflict. France resisted, leading to decades of military confrontation. Control over regions like Aquitaine and Normandy intensified the rivalry. The war was characterized by both pitched battles and drawn-out sieges across shifting front lines. A significant turning point came at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. Despite being outnumbered, the English longbowmen devastated the French knights. This victory temporarily solidified English dominance in parts of northern France and elevated King Henry V's prestige across Europe. Joan of Arc emerged in the early 15th century as a key figure in reversing English gains. Claiming divine guidance, she led French forces to lift the siege of Orléans. Captured by the Burgundians, she was handed to the English and executed for heresy in 1431, becoming a martyr. The Treaty of Troyes in 1420 attempted to settle succession by naming Henry V as heir to the French throne. However, both Henry and Charles VI died soon after, reigniting conflict. French forces, inspired by national sentiment, began reclaiming territory under Charles VII's leadership. By the war's end in 1453, England had lost nearly all its French holdings, retaining only Calais. The conflict had devastating effects on both nations, particularly France, which suffered enormous destruction, depopulation, and economic turmoil. The war helped to solidify French national identity. The 100 Years' War marked the decline of chivalric warfare and the rise of professional armies. Innovations such as the longbow and gunpowder artillery changed European combat. The war also contributed to political changes, especially in England, where Parliament grew in importance due to wartime taxation. Though lengthy and destructive, the war laid foundations for the modern French and English states. England turned focus to internal conflicts like the Wars of the Roses, while France consolidated power under a strong monarchy. The war left a legacy of heroism, tragedy, and transformation. 2. The Reconquista. The Reconquista refers to the long struggle by Christian kingdoms to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. It began in 711 AD with the Islamic conquest of most of modern-day Spain, and ended in 1492 with the fall of Granada, lasting approximately 781 years in various phases. After the initial conquest by Umayyad forces, Islamic rule established the Caliphate of Córdoba. This era saw flourishing science, culture, and architecture. However, Christian resistance in the mountainous northern regions remained resilient, forming the basis for future reconquests by the kingdoms of Asturias, Leon, Castile, and Aragon. The Battle of Covadonga around 722 marked the first major Christian victory. It became a symbol of defiance and religious determination. Gradually, Christian forces began pushing southward, recapturing cities and fortresses. These campaigns were driven by both religious zeal and political ambitions. Toledo's fall in 1085 was a key moment. It signified the decline of Muslim dominance and the growing strength of Christian forces. Over the centuries, alliances and betrayals shaped progress. Muslim dynasties like the Almoravids and Almohads tried to defend territories, leading to more intense warfare. The Christian military orders, such as the Knights Templar and the Order of Santiago, played vital roles. Pilgrimages to Santiago de Compostela, combined with papal support, further framed the war as a crusade. Castile emerged as the dominant Christian power by the late Middle Ages. In 1492, the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, successfully captured Granada, the last Muslim stronghold. This marked the final triumph of the Reconquista. The same year, they financed Columbus's voyage, signifying Spain's transition from defensive war to global expansion. The aftermath saw the forced conversion or expulsion of Jews and Muslims. The Inquisition was established to enforce religious unity. While politically unifying Spain, it also marked the end of religious tolerance and multicultural flourishing in Iberia that had existed under Islamic rule. The Reconquista reshaped Spanish identity, aligning it with Catholicism and centralized monarchy. The war created a deeply militarized society, experienced in siege warfare and religious conflict. This experience directly influenced Spain's colonial ventures, making the Reconquista foundational to Spanish and Portuguese imperial ambitions. 3. The Roman-Persian Wars. The Roman-Persian Wars were a centuries-long struggle between the Roman Empire and later Byzantines, and successive Persian empires, notably the Parthians and Sassanids. Starting in 54 BC and ending in 628 AD, these wars were among the longest in recorded history, driven by territorial and strategic rivalry. The origins lay in Rome's expansion into Asia Minor and the Near East. Persia, historically a dominant power in the region, viewed Roman encroachments as threats. Early confrontations included Roman generals like Crassus suffering major defeats, such as at Carrhae in 53 BC against the Parthians. Conflict escalated as both empires sought influence over Armenia and Mesopotamia. While neither side ever achieved decisive dominance, cities like Dura Europos and Antioch frequently changed hands. Long campaigns led to destruction and depopulation, as well as periodic truces and diplomatic marriages. Under the Sassanids, the Persian Empire became more aggressive. Shah Shapur I captured Roman Emperor Valerian in 260 AD, a humiliating event for Rome. Later, Emperor Diocletian reorganized Roman defenses, leading to renewed clashes. Still, the conflict remained largely deadlocked across centuries. The wars resumed under Emperor Heraclius, 610 to 641, when the Sassanids overran large parts of the Eastern Roman Empire. They seized Jerusalem in 614 and the True Cross relic. However, Heraclius mounted a successful counter-offensive, pushing deep into Persia and reversing their gains. The conflict concluded in 628 with a peace treaty after both empires had exhausted resources. A weakened Persia soon fell to Arab-Muslim armies. The Roman-Persian conflict had so drained both empires that neither could resist the rapid Islamic conquests that followed. These wars significantly shaped the political and military landscape of the ancient world. They influenced the development of fortifications, siege tactics, and border governance. Culturally, they deepened distinctions between Greco-Roman and Persian civilizational spheres, though trade and diplomacy persisted intermittently. The Roman-Persian Wars marked the twilight of the Classical Age and foreshadowed the rise of Islam. Their endurance highlighted both empires' resilience and limitations. Though neither side emerged dominant, the conflict shaped the power dynamics of Eurasia for nearly 7 centuries. 4. The Anglo-French Wars. The Anglo-French Wars refer to a series of military conflicts between England, later Britain, and France, spanning from 1202 to 1815. Although intermittent, the wars lasted over 6 centuries, driven by dynastic claims, territorial ambition, and colonial competition across Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia. The conflicts began with disputes over territories in France held by English monarchs. As vassals of the French king, English rulers often clashed over feudal obligations and sovereignty. The tension escalated into full-blown war, notably with the 100 Years' War from 1337 to 1453. After that long war, hostilities resumed in several forms, including the Italian Wars and wars of religion. The War of the Spanish Succession, 1701-1714, was another major chapter. Britain feared French dominance over Spain and its vast empire, leading to widespread conflict in Europe and overseas. The 7 Years' War, 1756–1763, was a global confrontation. Britain and France fought in North America, India, and the Caribbean. Britain emerged with major territorial gains, solidifying its maritime and colonial supremacy. France lost Canada and influence in India, reshaping global imperial power. The American Revolution, 1775–1783, saw France support the American colonies against Britain, partly to avenge earlier defeats. Though it contributed to American independence, it strained France's finances, helping spark the French Revolution. This set the stage for the Napoleonic era. The Napoleonic Wars, 1803–1815, marked the final and most intense phase. Napoleon Bonaparte's ambitions threatened all of Europe. Britain formed successive coalitions to counter French dominance. Major battles included Trafalgar, 1805, Austerlitz, 1805, and Waterloo, 1815, where Napoleon was finally defeated. Throughout these centuries, the Anglo-French rivalry spurred military innovation, naval development, and global exploration. Their competition shaped the modern world through colonialism, commerce, and diplomacy. It also established Britain and France as dominant global powers during the Age of Empire. The wars ended with France's defeat at Waterloo. The balance of power shifted in Britain's favor, inaugurating the Pax Britannica. Though rivals continued politically, warfare between the two nations ceased, and both transitioned toward modern nation-states and eventual allies in the 20th century. 5. The Ottoman-Habsburg Wars. The Ottoman-Habsburg Wars were a series of battles and sieges from 1526 to 1791 between the Ottoman Empire and the Habsburg monarchy. These wars were part of a broader struggle between Christian Europe and Islamic powers for control of Central Europe and the Balkans. The conflict began after the Ottomans defeated Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs in 1526. The Habsburgs, through marriage alliances, laid claim to the Hungarian throne, triggering a protracted struggle. Hungary became the central battleground, divided between the Habsburgs, Ottomans, and a semi-autonomous principality in Transylvania. The Siege of Vienna in 1529 was the first major attempt by the Ottomans to conquer the Habsburg capital. Though unsuccessful, it demonstrated the reach of Ottoman power into Europe. Further battles occurred over the next decades, with fluctuating fortunes for both sides. A key phase was the Long Turkish War, 1593 to 1606, marked by indecisive battles and massive destruction in Hungary. The war ended with the Treaty of Zsitvatarok, which stabilized borders temporarily. However, hostilities resumed periodically, especially during the 17th century. In 1683, the Ottomans launched a second siege of Vienna. This time, a combined Christian force led by Poland's King John III Sobieski repelled the invasion. The battle was a turning point, marking the beginning of Ottoman decline in Europe and Habsburg ascendancy. The following Great Turkish War, 1683 to 1699, led to the Treaty of Karlowitz. The Ottomans ceded Hungary and other territories to the Habsburgs. This significantly reduced Ottoman influence in Central Europe and marked a shift in power dynamics between the empires. The wars were not only religious, but strategic. Both empires sought control over trade routes and frontier fortresses. The military campaigns spurred advances in artillery, fortification design, and logistical planning. Civilian populations suffered greatly due to frequent raids and famine. The conflict ended with the Treaty of Sistova in 1791. The Habsburgs had expanded their territory while the Ottoman Empire focused on internal reform. The wars left lasting cultural and religious divisions in the Balkans and helped define modern national boundaries in Eastern Europe. 6. The Dutch War of Independence. The Dutch War of Independence, also known as the 80 Years' War, lasted from 1568 to 1648. It was a revolt by the 17 provinces of the Netherlands against the Spanish Habsburg Empire, fueled by religious repression, heavy taxation, and a desire for self-rule. Spain, under King Philip II, enforced strict Catholic orthodoxy through the Inquisition, and clamped down on Protestantism. The provinces, particularly in the north, were heavily Calvinist and resisted these efforts. Economic grievances further fueled resistance, especially among the wealthy merchant class. William of Orange, also known as William the Silent, became the key leader of the revolt. He organized military resistance and diplomatic outreach, emphasizing religious tolerance and provincial autonomy. His assassination in 1584 only strengthened the resolve of the rebellion. The Union of Utrecht in 1579 formalized the alliance of northern provinces against Spain. It laid the foundation for the Dutch Republic. Meanwhile, the southern provinces, modern Belgium, remained under Spanish control. The war thus began the geographical and cultural split of the Low Countries. From 1609 to 1621, a 12 years truce provided a temporary halt to hostilities. During this period, the Dutch expanded their global trade network, establishing colonies and dominating maritime commerce. Their economic strength became a key pillar of their war effort. War resumed, intertwined with the broader 30 Years' War. The Dutch achieved several military successes, including naval victories over Spain. Spanish power waned, weakened, by conflicts in other parts of Europe and internal economic crisis, making continued warfare unsustainable. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 officially ended the conflict. It recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic. This treaty was a major moment in European diplomacy, marking the beginning of the modern state system and confirming the decline of Spanish dominance. The Dutch emerged as a global power in trade, finance, and culture. Their victory in the war not only brought independence, but established a foundation for the Dutch Golden Age. The conflict redefined European geopolitics and showed that sustained resistance could overcome imperial rule. 7. The Arab-Byzantine Wars. The Arab-Byzantine Wars lasted from 629 to the late 1180s, making them one of the longest and most transformative series of conflicts in history. These wars were fought between the Eastern Roman, Byzantine, Empire and successive Islamic caliphates over control of the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean. The wars began after the Prophet Muhammad's death, when Arab Muslim armies launched campaigns against Byzantine territories. The decisive Battle of Yarmouk in 636 saw a small Arab force defeat a much larger Byzantine army. This led to the loss of Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. The early Muslim conquests dealt a heavy blow to Byzantium, stripping it of some of its richest provinces. However, the empire retained Anatolia and its capital, Constantinople, thanks to strong fortifications and advanced military engineering. Naval power also helped Byzantium hold the Aegean. Arab sieges of Constantinople in 674, 678, and again in 717 and 718 failed. The Byzantines used Greek fire, an incendiary weapon, to repel attackers. These victories preserved Christian rule in southeastern Europe and ensured Byzantium's survival for centuries, despite continual border skirmishes. Under the Abbasids, the conflict transitioned to a more static frontier war along the Taurus Mountains. Annual raids became common, often devastating towns and fortresses. Meanwhile, both sides developed intricate diplomacy and intelligence networks to manage their long-standing rivalry. During periods of peace, there was limited cultural exchange. Translation movements brought Greek knowledge into the Islamic world. At the same time, Arab cities flourished in science and learning, while Byzantium preserved classical traditions and Orthodox Christianity in its shrinking core territories. By the 10th century, Byzantium mounted successful counteroffensives, under emperors like Nikephoros II Phocas and Basil the Coup. They regained parts of Syria and the Levant. However, these gains were reversed by Seljuk Turks, who defeated Byzantium at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. The Arab-Byzantine Wars gradually faded as new powers like the Crusader states and Ottomans emerged. The centuries-long struggle reshaped the cultural and religious landscape of the Mediterranean. It forged identities and boundaries that echo today in Eastern Europe and the Islamic world. 8. The Vietnam War series. The Vietnam War series refers to the prolonged conflict involving Vietnamese resistance against foreign domination, from 1946 to 1991. This 45-year period included the First Indochina War against France, the Vietnam War against the U.S. and South Vietnam, and the Cambodian-Vietnamese War. It began with the First Indochina War, 1946–1954. After World War II, Vietnamese nationalists led by the communist Viet Minh under Ho Chi Minh fought to end French colonial rule. The decisive Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954 ended French ambitions in Indochina. The Geneva Accords split Vietnam at the 17th parallel, with Ho Chi Minh's communist government in the north and a U.S.-backed regime in the south. Tensions escalated quickly. Guerrilla warfare by the Viet Cong and increasing American support set the stage for full conflict. The Vietnam War, 1955–1975, was one of the 20th century's most significant and divisive wars. The U.S. became fully engaged after the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964. Heavy bombing campaigns and massive troop deployments followed, but the terrain and guerrilla tactics favored the North. Major battles such as the Tet Offensive in 1968 shocked American public opinion. Though militarily costly for the North, it undermined U.S. political resolve. Anti-war sentiment grew globally. Despite technological superiority, U.S. forces could not defeat the deeply rooted nationalist movement. The war ended with the fall of Saigon in 1975. North Vietnamese forces unified the country under communist rule. The U.S. withdrew in 1973 after the Paris Peace Accords, but fighting continued until South Vietnam's complete collapse. Millions died, and the country was devastated. Conflict resumed with Cambodia in the late 1970s. Vietnam invaded Cambodia in 1978 to overthrow the Khmer Rouge. This led to the Sino-Vietnamese War in 1979, as China retaliated. Vietnam occupied Cambodia until 1989, extending the region's instability and violence for another decade. In 1991, after the withdrawal from Cambodia and economic reforms, Vietnam normalized relations with neighbors and former enemies. The series of wars finally concluded. The long conflict reshaped Vietnam politically, economically, and socially, leaving scars that persist even in modern Southeast Asia. If you're passionate about uncovering the forgotten stories of our past, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Don't forget to like the video if you're enjoying the journey so far. And stay tuned because there's so much more history waiting to be unearthed, right here on Buried Truths.